Today I want to talk about how to mix and use subtle color changes in our painting. And what I mean by that is when we have a gray day where there's not a lot of sunlight, it's overcast, I don't want to use pure primary, secondary colors. I want to learn how to mix subtle colors and create subtle color changes that still gives me atmosphere, some luminosity in the painting, some depth, and a sense of light, even on a cloudy day. So today we're going to be looking at and then figuring out how this artist used subtle colors and created subtle color changes to achieve what he did. And the artist is Anton Mauve, and I have some of his paintings here. And of course, we're talking about mixing color on a cloudy day, because if this was full bright sunlight, I wouldn't want to use the color palette that he's using here. But on a cloudy day where it's more overcast, there's not a lot of strong color temperature changes, not a lot of strong value changes, shadow, sunlight. What's a better palette to use for that? It gives us that kind of subtle muted look, but not dead color, because it's so easy to get when you're painting a cloudy day to have dead colors. Now we do want to use neutral colors. In other words, I don't want, again, bright primary or pure primary and secondary colors. So using a palette that it's easier to create neutrals. And by neutral, I mean closer to grayer, but still creating grays that have a color to them. So Anton Mauve was a Dutch artist, late 1800s, 1880s, 90s. I think he was related to Van Gogh by marriage and supported him some early on. But a really good landscape painter and genre painter, people working out in the fields and as you can see on the beach here. And it's a cloudy day and everything is very subtle color-wise. Very subtle, soft color changes, not a lot of bright colors. And my guess is he's using a palette of some kind of black. I don't know if they had ivory black back then or not, but black, yellow ochre, and some kind of earth red, English red. I'm thinking burnt sienna, might not have been burnt sienna, and then white. So that's his primary colors. I mean, they're not primary, but that's what he's using in place of primary colors. So black is now the blue, yellow ochre is the yellow, and let's say burnt sienna is going to be his red plus white. And he's using that to get these subtleties, these muted colors. And when I look at this, you can say very gray, but it's a grayed or muted yellow in the foreground, gray or muted green in the shrubbery back here on the beach, and kind of a warm, luminous color in the sky. It's not a flat, opaque gray. There's a luminosity to it. So he's using a combination of the white, black, and yellow ochre to give that sense of light coming through the clouds. Generally, on a cloudy day, especially one that's really overcast like this, the sun is behind the clouds, so it's coming through the translucent clouds and creating this luminosity that you see and hear that works really well. And again, you can do that with a very limited palette. So let's look at a few more here before we start mixing. So another one here, just beautiful, subtle color changes. Look at the beautiful grays in here, going from a gray yellow ochre to a gray, kind of a warm black to a grayish green, using the black and the yellow ochre. Same thing in the trees, black and yellow ochre, but subtle value changes. And then again, the luminosity in the sky of the ochre, black, a little bit of burnt sienna in there. So another one here. I'm going to zoom in on this just a bit and see it a bit better. Again, the black and ochre in the grass. Now he's got something resembling cad yellow or maybe chrome yellow, which is a brighter yellow. So I'm not saying he just stuck to black and earth yellow and earth red. But I think it did for the most part, and then added some, maybe even a chrome green there. And now a little bit of introduction of some blue. And the minute he introduces a color amongst all this muted stuff, that blue really makes an impact. Now, of course, his values are really accurate, and his drawing's very good. But once you get the values down, you can have a lot of just subtle value changes, very, very limited color. But if your values are right, the color just works beautifully, very harmonious, and really makes an impact. Now, to show the difference here, this is a very limited palette showing a very subtle, light, cloudy day, subtle colors. This next painting is not. This is Edmund Tarbell painting, Boston School painter. And here it's a bright sunny day. He doesn't want to use black and yellow ochre and burnt sienna. It wouldn't make much sense. I mean, you could do it, and you could still have color harmony, still have good value relationships, but the intensity of the sunlight would be missing. And here he's got more pure primaries, pure blue, pure secondaries, really strong green in here. Now there's some muted color, some gray or neutral color in the whites, some gray in the grass and the sky and the tree trunks, but those strong primaries of the blue, green, some red, really makes a strong impact of a bright, sunny day. Same thing here in a painting by Willard Metcalf. More primary blue, strong secondary violet, red-orange, yellow-orange, kind of a red-orange over here. Strong blue-violet down here in the water. And you don't want muted colors. And you're not going to get that subtle, muted harmony that Anton Mauve gets here. And you don't want that because you got a brighter, sunnier day. This one's really strong, really intense, pure primary color, and secondary with the and tertiary with the yellow, orange, red, orange, and green down here. But again, going back to Anton Mauve, you can see where now black being your blue and yellow ochre and burnt sienna, the burnt sienna for a lot of these is just kind of a modifying color that just kind of grays the black and the ochre a little bit. Now he does have a little bit of blue, so he has one spot of strong color there, that blue rag, and it really pops out because everything else is muted, so that blue really stands out. But nice harmony here. Sky is nice and luminous. It's not just black and white. There's some ochre and burnt sienna in there that creates a bit more of a luminosity that we want in the sky, even on a cloudy day. This is kind of a look inside maybe the start of a painting. Unfinished. And again, kind of the burnt sienna, the black, ochre, some white, not too much white yet. But you can tell there's not a lot of outlining. He doesn't come in and see things in terms of outline. He sees things in terms of mass. And with his limited color palette, he can get black and burnt sienna for the horses in here, a little more black here, more burnt sienna here, and just see shape and start laying in subtle value changes in those shapes. And it helps when you're using that very limited color of the black, burnt sienna, and ochre and white, that you don't have much to think about color-wise. Maybe a little bit of temperature, more ochre where it's warmer, a little more black and burnt sienna where it's cooler. You can focus on the values more. So you're just filling in big shapes of value here. A couple more. So a little bit more bigger, more finished painting. Again, I'm guessing ochre, burnt sienna, black, and white. And he's going for value relationships and some subtle color changes. A little bit of violet here, which could be just the black and a little bit of red. There's a red spot there. But everything else is a very subtle color very subtle value changes. But there is a temperature to the sand. It's not just black and white. There's a temperature and a depth to the sand by getting subtle color and value changes in there. Last one, and we'll take a look at this one. I'm going to use this one to mix colors so we can kind of play around with the color changes. And again, my guess is it's black and ochre for the greens. Again, subtle value changes. Black and burnt sienna for the violets. A little bit stronger burnt sienna here. But he does introduce some blue up here in the sky a little bit. But everything else, I think, is that limited palette of earth red and earth yellow and ivory black and white. And we'll do some mixing on that and put the colors next to each other and see if we can come up with the same luminosity and sense of atmosphere in the painting. All right, now I started the copy. This is a 6x8. And again, I'm copying a painting from Anton Mauve. You can see the painting there. It's a very limited palette, muted color. And the palette I'm using, and I'm guessing it's somewhat close to what he has, black, ivory black, burnt sienna, yellow, ochre, and white. I do have a little bit of cad yellow light here just to get a little bit different green. And I don't know, probably didn't use burnt sienna, probably more of an earth red, some kind of English red maybe, but ochre. And maybe a chrome yellow. Cadmiums were around back then, but chrome yellow was the more intense yellow, besides cad yellow light. But here are some mixtures that I'm getting from this palette. Here are the greens. This is black and cad yellow, fairly strong yellow-green, but still very muted compared to like Viridian and cad yellow or phthalo blue or ultramarine and cad yellow. And this is burnt sienna with black. A little bit more black here, a little bit more burnt sienna up here. I can go from a little bit cooler with the black and warmer with the burnt sienna. That's a bit of a violet. That's the violet I can mix. If I'm thinking in terms of the black is blue, burnt sienna is red, the ochre is yellow, then when I mix the yellow and black, I get my green. If I mix the red and black, I'm mixing a violet. Now, it's very muted. It's very neutral. But in context or relation to everything else on the painting, it'll read a little bit on the violet side. Grade, but still violet. And then my orange, I'm mixing the yellow ochre and the burnt sienna, and that's my orange in here. Now the range is not very high as far as the saturation is concerned. Very grade saturated color, or muted grade color. But when I get the right value, and if I have a good composition, these colors can make a really beautiful color harmony. And you can see that in his painting. Very limited color, very muted, but the values are right, composition is good, and creates a very subtle beauty in the painting. So I've started some of the painting already. Now I see the sky as a yellow ochre sky. So this is white, yellow ochre. Here's the yellow ochre, a little bit of viridian, or not viridian, burnt sienna. So it's slightly redder, and this is slightly more yellow or ochre. So same value, but a little bit of color change. Then over here, a little bit of value change, just a bit more ivory black here. And I mix them together a little bit there. So I got about 3 values in here for the sky. And that's what I'm doing when I'm looking at the areas in his painting, is seeing them in terms of red, yellow, blue, and combining them to get the green, violet, orange. So simplify your colors, simplify your values, and when you're mixing color, think in terms of primary or secondary colors. So let's go on and get some more blocked in. I'm going to be using first just a bright bristle brush, and I'm going to get some things scrubbed in. I'll start the darks down in here in the water. It's reflecting, I guess, the trees and the house. So I'm going to get ivory black, burnt sienna. I know it's just a dark, muted neutral, but I don't want straight black. Burnt sienna gives it a bit more depth color-wise. And I'm going to just lay these things in, not trying to finesse anything, just laying in big areas of color and putting them right next to each other. So putting this next to the green. Any of the smaller stuff, there's a little bit of highlight on the water, there's some boats there. That goes on top because it's too small to paint around. And any ripples in the water or textures in the grass, that's going to be dealt with after everything is all blocked in. Now I see the water, same as the sky, only darker, because I don't want the reflection of the water to be the same value. Then it looks like the sky is going all the way down. So um, I will get a little bit of black mixed in with black and yellow ochre. Maybe a bit more ivory black in the reflection of the sky than in the actual sky. Then I see a little, I'm going to get some orange, the burnt sienna, yellow ochre. See a little bit of the orange, a little bit warmer. And when I see something warmer, a warmer gray, like in there, it's either the ochre or the burnt sienna, or maybe a mixture of the two. Then I see a little bit stronger black representing, again, black is the blue here. And lastly, I'm going to come in with the water, some white ochre. I want to get it as light as the sky and get this a bit warmer and lighter, just lightly dragging it in. And probably a bit too light. Darken it up some. A little bit of half tone here between the dark and the light. And the same thing with the path. There's a path there. I see it as a red. So burnt sienna, a little bit of black and ochre in it. I can almost make the decision everything that I mix is going to have some kind of mixture of burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and black in it. Just depends. The question is which one dominates. And so one color has to dominate, or else you're going to get no color decision at all. Softening the edge there a little bit. Now when I go back here to the house, I see the house darker than the sky and a bit on the red side. So I'm going to get burnt sienna and white, get the right value close to it, and then get a little bit of burnt black in it. But I want the burnt sienna to dominate. I want it slightly warmer. So a lot of mixing. So I'm not using straight color of any of these. Making the decision which one's going to dominate and how much of the other two. Now going over to the other roof on the left side, it's more of a reddish roof. And again, kind of a grayer. I'm going to go with this kind of neutral mixture of the blue and burnt sienna. A little more burnt sienna in there. Seeing also color temperature as well. Just looking for subtle value change. The shapes in here. I don't want to be too try and be too exact or try and render something. In other words, I'm not rendering grass or dirt. Trees over here, I'm seeing spots of color, value, and trying to set up what he put down in terms of value and then color relationship. And again, anything that reads a bit more on the blue side is going to have a bit more black. A bit more on the red side is going to be more burnt sienna. And then yellow would be a bit more yellow ochre. Really didn't want to care about the drawing. I just wanted to put spots of color next to each other. This is about mixing the color, not matching exactly what's there. Get this shrubbery. I see the shrubbery here is a kind of mixture of the black, burnt sienna, which again, if the black is the blue, burnt sienna is the red, then this is some kind of violet if I'm thinking of color on the color wheel. No, it's not violet. It's very, very neutral or grayed. But that's my thought process. Help me think through what colors to use. I'm looking for a little darker shapes in here. Now there's a real light green. I can mix the cad yellow and black and the yellow ochre and black kind of together a little bit. More ochre and burnt sienna. So the green way back in here is fairly muted. And I want to clean my brush off when I'm changing value. As I go from a little lighter to a little darker or just a totally different color, I want to make sure, clean the brush. Don't try and just pile more paint on a dirty brush. Just doesn't work as much. Now I get a more of a bluish color. So the blue is the black for the house in here. Get it the right value. And some ochre and a little black. Soften that edge. Go back with a wider brush and get some of the sky color notes in here. And again, it goes from thinner clouds where more light's coming through and they become kind of translucent to thicker clouds, not quite as translucent, light's not coming through, so that it gets a little darker. That's what I'm seeing with the black in here. Go back to the ochre. This is lighter. And it really helps, especially since I'm just focusing on color, but it really helps just to see things in terms of shapes and spots of color. Don't try and render with a brush too much. Don't draw with a brush. If you put the right shape down in the right spot, it will work. Figure right there. And I'm just looking for dots of slightly lighter value, subtle color change. And I can always go back into these shapes and get some subtle changes as well, a little bit of value change in there. Something on the roof. And with a smaller brush, let's get some dark neutral colors. Again, just the blue and burnt sienna or black and burnt sienna. And this kind of a main tree here. And I have to gradually let up on the pressure as that tree comes up. Maybe a bit darker. Not too warm. I don't want too much burnt sienna in this, but it's better, twist the brush to get kind of a point. The brush is good. It'll come to a point, and then just hold it pretty far back so that you can control the pressure. What you don't want to do is paint a tree like that with like this. Way too heavy-handed that way. You can get as light as possible and as thin as possible with the brush far away. Oops, not getting too thin there, so I'm going to cut in on it. Again, I can always come back and use the negative, the background color of the sky, to cut in on some of those branches to thin them down. Now I can come in here. Already got the shape down like I want. I'm just going to darken it a little bit right there. Then the others are not quite that dark, especially the ones back in here. I want to get rid of that little brush as soon as I'm done with the trees. Tempting to keep using it because we see some smaller shapes, but use as big a brush as possible. I'm going to come back in some of these areas. Some reddish tone in the but it's good practice, I think, to see how other artists see color and how they simplify things. More importantly, how they simplify. But it is interesting too, just to try and figure out color wise, knowing this is a more muted scene using a limited palette. So it's interesting trying to figure out. You know, the palette is some kind of red, yellow, blue, orange, violet, green, depending on how saturated the colors are or pure the colors look, tells you whether it's more of an earth palette or a brighter, more pure palette. And this is definitely more of an earth palette. Add a few more. I'm using a little bit of the cad yellow because it does give me a little bit more of a green. Yeah, not so much worried about the drawing, although I don't want bad drawing here. So my drawing is off. That's not an excuse, but more concerned about putting colors next to each other to suggest the scene. Then he has a nice working of edges as well. Some muted bare trees in the background, some bare trees, branches here. Yeah, and I can push these colors a little bluer with the black, a little more red with the ochre, burnt sienna, or a little more towards yellow with the ochre. But that gives me kind of a nice idea of what Anton Mauve is thinking there, color-wise. Going to get the darkest dark in here, the black burnt sienna boat in there. There we go.